Well, you know, I love the National Guard, and this is my family. And it doesn't make any difference where I go and where I take this old body, but my heart and my spirit will always be in the National Guard. And I will never, never forget that first and foremost, I am and will always be a New Mexico National Guardsman. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
If I could do it, anybody can. There's no limitation as to what you can accomplish if you have the persistence and you have the dedication and you do it. My name is Lieutenant General Retired Edward Baca. I was able to serve in almost every major position in the New Mexico National Guard. I served as starting off with a traffic manager when I was very young. Then I was a supervisory examiner, and I was the controller, and I was the logistics officer. I was the military personnel officer. And then eventually I became the chief of staff, the command administrative officer, which equated to the chief of staff. So all of these positions that I held prepared me really well to be the Adjutant General, and ultimately prepared me well to be the chief of the National Guard Bureau.
Major General Kenneth A. Nava. I'm the Adjutant General of the New Mexico National Guard. General Baca was my grandfather's lieutenant. My grandfather was his platoon sergeant. I first met General Baca as a private, and it was my grandfather, Tomas Rey, who introduced me to General Baca. He was the Adjutant General at the time. Of course, he was very big about doing battlefield circulation and checking on his troops. So I saw him many times at annual training at different places, but of course I wouldn't interact with him at that point because I was a young private. But my grandfather is the one that introduced me to him.
Colonel Craig Gilcrease, and I am the state surgeon on the part-time side and the director of human resources for the full-time side. So I knew General Baca since I was in the 6th grade. I was about 11 years old, and we moved in Santa Fe. We moved to a new house, and they moved across the street from us. The Bacas moved in, and quickly became good friends with their kids. We spent a lot of time hanging out together and playing outside and doing stuff, and went to school together. And over the years, became really close to the family, and pretty much did everything together.
My name is Vince Lopez. I'm a retired major with the Guard. I joined right after I got out of the Navy. I came home and joined the Guard right away, and was able to go to OCS right away. And that's where I met General Baca. He'd go to our classes and go challenge us for races, because he always challenged everybody for a race, you know, 2 mile, 5 mile, 10 mile, whatever it was. But that's where I met him.
I was very fortunate that I had very loving parents, and my father especially, and both my father and mother raised me with a lot of integrity, and not preaching it, but living it. And so I was fortunate that I had great role models in my father and my mother. I grew up right here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I went to school at St. Mike's. St. Michael's High School then went from the 1st grade all the way to the 12th. And then from there on, I went to St. Michael's College. My wife's name is Rita Hannigan Baca, and I met her. St. Michael's used to be an all-boys school, and Loretto Academy was where the Loretto Inn is now. She went to an all-girls school at Loretto Academy, taught by the nuns. I was taught by the Christian Brothers. Now, the only thing we didn't do was attend class together, because all our activities and all were together. And I saw this young lady that I thought was extremely attractive, and we fell in love, and we were high school sweethearts.
When I'd get to go to the house to pick him up, or go eat, or hang out a little bit, Miss Baca, I call her, it's Rita, but I always called her Miss Baca. She was always so sweet, you know. Hi, Vince, you know, come on in. And she'd always offer me something to eat, something to drink. And you know, General Baca was gone a lot. I mean, he was one of those, so she was the spouse at home that took care of the family.
And even though he was the general and he was the adjutant general, and there was times where I'd be around him and it would be, you know, David's dad or Mr. Baca or whatever. You know, it was just it wasn't always, yeah, military to him. He did have a very nice personal side to him, and he did enjoy life outside of the military. So.
Well, I'd like to tell you that I joined for all kinds of patriotic reasons, love of country, all those things, you know. But the truth of the matter is that my dad passed away, and I was really torn up by it. I was very close to my father, and he had passed away suddenly at the age of 44. I was 18 years old, and I really took it hard. I couldn't concentrate in school. I couldn't do anything. So my cousin, who was a World War II veteran and also a Korean War veteran and a captain in the National Guard, and my role model, he was also my godfather, my padrino. And so he came to my house one day shortly after my dad died, and he said, "Get in the car." I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Don't ask." So he brought me out to the armory and came in and went over and put his Class A jacket on. He was working full-time with the Guard then, and made me stand in front of the flag. And there was a sergeant there that was waiting, and he had all the paperwork done and all. And the sergeant sat by there, and he said, "Raise your right hand." And I said, "I don't want to join the military." And he said, "Did I ask? Raise your right hand." So I raised my right hand and I took the oath, and here I am. 42 years later, I retired.
He never left the Guard. I mean, that's just his heart and soul.
When I went on active duty, there was a shortage of officers then, so I was a second lieutenant holding a captain's slot. And I was commanding a unit, headquarters and headquarters detachment of a ordnance unit, 79th Ordnance Battalion. And so as a commander, I got the word, myself and another company commander that was there with the 85th Ordnance Company, got the word that we were deploying to Vietnam. The battalion commander called us in. It was all top secret, and we were not supposed to let anybody know. Finally, they said, "You can tell your wife and your family, but other than that, you can't let anybody else know." Well, as it turns out, the battalion commander called me back in and he said, "Your unit, you can't take your unit because you're a second lieutenant and you're 2 grades under. So there's a captain, a West Point Military Academy captain, that's going to take your place." He said, "I tried to everything I could to let you keep your unit, but you can't. But if you volunteer and if you go with another company, I can put you in wherever you want to go. If you want to go to Vietnam, you can go with the other company." So I said yes, and I volunteered and I went with the other company. And I went, now as a first lieutenant, I went as the XO of that company. And so I actually was responsible for preparing 2 units for overseas movement.
Well, I don't know what his biggest obstacle was that he had overcome. I can tell you that for the very longest time, you can look at the adjutants general here on my headquarters, here on my floor, and you can see that there are very few Hispanic named adjutants general. And so General Baca really was a pathfinder, if you will, for many young men and women who have Hispanic background. To have risen to the level that he did, to be the adjutant general, obviously that was something that was very special. But then to be selected by President Clinton and brought up to the as the chief of the National Guard Bureau was quite remarkable. And he did an incredible job there as the chief of the National Guard Bureau.
Well, I had one vision in mind, and because I had seen what happened to the Bataan veterans, I'd seen the problems that the 804th and the 120th had with their equipment and with the obsolescence of their training and their equipment and all. So I came in with the idea, and I got my staff together and I told them, we are going to be the best equipped, the best trained, and the most highly motivated unit in the United States Army and the United States Air Force.
General Baca transformed the New Mexico National Guard and brought in the very latest air defense weapons at the time. He was aggressive and was very astute in how he went about getting this equipment and the force, building the force that he built.
We were modernized. We reorganized the state and got the most current state-of-the-art air defense equipment and also the combat service support equipment. The Air National Guard was the first Air National Guard unit to get the Block 40 F-16s. There was only 4 Air Force units that received them at the time, and the Air National Guard was one of them. New Mexico Air National Guard was the top one. And one of the things that stands out in my career was that day that they flew in that first F-16. Now you understand that the Air Guard had been doing the LANA mission already for several years on the A-7. So they already had the low attack night capability down pat. Now they got the F-16 with the Lantern, and it was just amazing. And then also when we got our first Hawk missile battalion in the Army National Guard, and we got the first pure SHAP battalion, Chaparral battalion in the total Army. It used to be Chaparral Vulcan, and we got the first pure Chaparral. And the Chaparral fire units that we were getting and were fresh off the assembly line, brand new. We fired the first Hawk missile in the reserve components. I'm proud to say that the lieutenant that fired that had nothing to do with me, had to do with his own qualifications and what he did, but he fired the first missile, Hawk missile in the reserve components. Then we went on to field the roll-on missile system. Now that was equivalent to the Block 40 F-16s. It's the first time in the history of the Guard that a National Guard unit had fielded a new piece of equipment before the active component. And they went through IOC, Initial Operational Capability. They gave them 3 years, just like they do an active component unit. They met the deadline, and they were dubbed, and I can quote General Don Infante, who was then the head of the air defense community nationwide. I can quote him saying they were the best short-range air defense battalion in the total Army.
Well, I can tell you his work ethic, he worked hard all day, every day, when he was on duty. When he was off duty, I'm sure he was also working. But then he did things above and beyond that. And I probably don't have all the insight, but I can tell you he did things to help support his family. He worked after duty hours to help make sure that his family was taken care of. The man is he has an incredible work ethic. He has an incredible work ethic.
No work week as the Adjutant General was typical. There was new challenges, new missions, new everything happening every day. As you can see, as we were reorganizing the entire National Guard, and lobbying for all this new equipment and all, it required doing a lot of things every day. It required a lot of travel. You have to understand that we built about 17 new armories at the same time, because best equipped also included facilities. And our facilities were in pretty bad shape then, so we built new armories. We built the new state headquarters and moved out of the old state headquarters on Cerrillos Road.
And then one time we went on a 6-city tour in one day, like to Tucumcari. We went to Tucumcari first, and there was a crowd. It was a full gym for him to speak. He spoke about, I think at the time it was the drug demand reduction thing,
So a typical work week one meant going to work early and getting off late. Another thing that I was really proud of that we were able to accomplish was we put the Guard back in the communities. We started using the communities as a basis for real community support. We started the Coats for Kids program, which is still going today. Tremendous success. We started the Taos Feeds Taos program, where the first Christmas we fed like 300 people. And with all the veterans groups, all the different clubs and organizations and the schools, now today they feed, I think, close to 2,000 people every year. So these programs are still ongoing. Another mission that I'm really proud of that we did here was our counter-drug mission. We started the first drug demand reduction program in the country. And we received the first DOD demand reduction award in the nation. And they made it a national program. And those counter-drug activities are still taking place today on the border, and because it didn't only include drug demand reduction, it included all those other counter-drug activities. You know, one other thing is the Adjutant General that I'm really proud of. Now, I can tell you categorically that we were the first state in the nation to establish a family support program. And you were asking me about how my wife supported me through all of that. She was very instrumental in starting that. There was a lady from the National Guard Bureau who had been hired full-time to establish the program. And since we already had one going, she came here to New Mexico and got together with my wife, Rita, and to determine what they needed to do to make this thing a national program. If I'm not mistaken, it was even before the active components got involved.
But I think what he did is he set into motion what New Mexico's capable, and he set into motion what the expectations were for the future tags, and that were going to be appointed to that role, and they had big shoes to fill.
What I enjoyed most about being the Adjutant General is watching all of these different young men and women develop and become what they were, whether it was a sergeant or whether it was to watching people succeed. That was a lot of enjoyment in that. And watching young commanders become real commanders and succeed in whatever their mission was. That was the most enjoyable part of being the Adjutant General. The least, and in every organization there has to be discipline, and there's times that it can be pretty negative, and that's the least thing that you like to do, even though it's a requirement in some cases. You always try to work things on a positive way, but sometimes you have no choice but to discipline somebody. And that's what I liked. That's what I disliked the most.
It was guys like General Baca that set the stage for me not having to worry about what my ethnic background was, what my race was. I never worried about that, not once. But it's because of people like him that set that stage and created that path for folks to follow. If you look after General Baca, there's a lot of Hispanic surnamed individuals who have served as the Adjutant General. Most of them, actually.
Just being the first Hispanic chief and being one of the senior ranking general officers. And in those days, we used to joke about it because we'd say, we're going to start a Hispanic Generals Association and we're going to have our meetings in a phone booth. But there wasn't very many of us.
Well, you know, as a young officer, as I was commissioned, it was General Ed Baca that commissioned me. It was General Ed Baca that spoke at my graduation ceremony. I think he just inspired me by his leadership. You know, there's not a specific instance that I can think of where, you know, he said, "Hey, Ken Nava, I need you to do this," or "You should do this," and then you'll be. It wasn't like that ever. Just his incredible leadership and his motivating speaking. He is an incredible speaker. And so I think many of those opportunities where he had a chance to speak and I was there listening, oftentimes you just left in awe at what an incredible speech it was, how moving it was. He was always very, very good.
There's a lot of things that contributed to that. As I mentioned earlier, the history of the New Mexico National Guard and so forth. I would have to say on top of all of that would be the support from my wife. Without her and without her support and encouragement and the confidence that she gave me, I would never have achieved that rank. And the next thing is that I was fortunate in that I always surrounded myself with people that were smarter than I was, that were more knowledgeable than I was and all. And I've always said this, that they made me look even better than I was. And so eventually I was selected to be the chief.
And then he became the lieutenant general. And I remember one time I had to go to DC for meetings. So after the meetings, one day I went to the Pentagon to go to his office, or try to go to his office. But it was already little after 5, and I got there and I ran into one of the old New Mexico guardsmen, and he says, "Hey, it's after 5, he's probably not there, I'll take you to his office." So we go to his office, and he's still in there. There's no secretaries or anybody there because they're all gone. But he's in his office with about 5 generals and several colonels, and he's having a meeting. And I just open the door like 3 inches and peek in, and he stands up, Vince, come on in. And you know, and those generals are looking at me like, because I was in my civilian clothes and, you know, just regular, and he's, "Come on in." He goes, "Hey, this is my friend Vince from New Mexico," and he was all happy, and then he says, "Hey, you guys, do you mind giving us a few minutes?" And so, you know, that's how he is. You know, he was in a conference with these generals and colonels, and he took the time. You know, we only spent like 5 minutes, but he took the time.
As a chief of the National Guard Bureau, you are the channel of communication between 50 states, 3 territories in the district, and the secretaries of the Army and the secretaries of the Air Force, and the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So you have to get you all those duckies in a row, and you have to get the support from those adjutants generals, and so you have to work with them. I decided that in my first year as a chief, I was going to visit as many states as I could, and I set a record. There was only one other chief that came close. I visited 43 states in 1 year. Now you understand that I still had to do all my duties in the Pentagon, which requires one heck of a lot. So I did a lot of that on the weekends. So even though I didn't have drill anymore because I was the chief of the National Guard Bureau, I was gone on most of the weekends. I'd leave on a Friday afternoon and I'd hit all the states, for example, that were close to DC, then on the eastern seaboard. I'd hit maybe 4 or 5 states in one day, in one weekend. And so yeah, it was that. And then when you were in town, it was constant meetings with the Secretary of Defense, the Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, a lot of social activity at night. Well, let me say this. I guess one of the biggest things that I again, let me just preface it with, I was fortunate that I had a really great director of the Army Guard, 2 of them. One retired and the other one came afterwards. And I had a great director of the Air Guard, 2 of them also. And so any accomplishments that I had, I have to pass on to them as well, because they were really good at what they did. And I think that achieving the highest state of readiness that the Guard had ever achieved in both the Army and the Air National Guard were two of the things that I'm really proud of. And it paid dividends. As you can see, what they did in Bosnia, what they did in the Persian Gulf, what they did in Iraq and Iran and all that, that readiness really paid off.
I knew he ran a lot because every day he'd run and we'd see him in the morning, bright and early. He'd be cooling off, walking down the street. We'd be out, getting ready to go to school and stuff, and he'd run by the bus stop, and I'd be there with his sons. And every day, rain, snow, shine, it did not matter. He was out there pounding the pavement, and would run at lunch, would run in the evening. He was always running. And when we met him, he was just gracious and loved the family. They had a big family. They were all in sports. He supported the whole community of sports.
Another thing I'm very proud of the whole physical fitness, weight control programs and all that. We really were the pioneers here in New Mexico for that, and we continued it on when I became the chief. But I remember when I was a young adjutant general, very young, the people in Congress did not have the respect for the Guard that we have now. They thought that we just had our bunch of lazy guardsmen and that weren't in shape and so forth. So I decided that I'd run my first marathon. And so I ran my first marathon at age 45. And when I got my certificate, I was going to go present it to the congressman that was complaining about this. The executive director of the National Guard Association had told me about it, but as it was, he was defeated, so I never in that next election, so I never got to do that.
But he meeting him, I just remember a man that was just tough and just liked to be fit and trained, and was always doing marathons and military runs. And we had several other military folks within the community in the neighborhood that all would come, and he'd make his aides run with him. The poor captains that got assigned to him had to be runners. And so that was always one of the challenges, is making sure that whoever was one of his aides was going to know they were going to be putting a lot of miles on their tennis shoes. So,
but I was proud to say that I did 4 marathons and took the New Mexico National Guard marathon team every year to the National Guard Marathon in Lincoln. And of course, after I became the chief, we continued that. The New Mexico National Guard has a great history. And the New Mexico National Guard is an outfit that you can be proud of if you join, and you can be proud that you're in it.
And I sure appreciate everything he did for me. He was a great mentor, and he did a lot for everybody. But I could say for me, he was like, he was too young to be a second dad, but he was just like a dad.
Out of all of the people that I've worked for and all the great leaders that I've been mentored by and had the opportunity to serve under, he by far has had the most influence on where I'm at today, and I think the person that I've become with regards to my military career and my commitment to the organization, now having passed 32 years, up on almost 32 years of service. So it just always, anytime I've ever thought of anything or had any challenges, I really literally just reflect on how mentally tough and how General Baca would handle things, and I know I would not want to let him down. And so I've always upheld that in the back of my mind, and so I've served, out of respect for him, because he put his faith in my, in me joining, and so I just didn't want to ever let him down.
I believe that anything that I can share with the youth of today, I'm more than happy to do that. Or not only with the youth, but with the civilian population and all, to make everybody aware of what really makes this country great. And that's your veteran. That's your soldier, your sailor, your airman, your Coast Guardsman. These are what have kept this country going, and this is what makes this country great. each war is different. Each war consisted of a different enemy, different tactics, different everything. But the one thing in common was that there was common, ordinary people that did extraordinary things, and that's what I would impart on anybody that was looking at these things. To understand that these were soldiers, sailors, and airmen, that a lot of them were just fresh out of high school, just young kids. I look at those young kids that were with me in Vietnam now, and they look older than I do. But no, that these Americans are willing to step forward when their country needs them and do their duty. We hear about the generals, you know, we all know about General MacArthur, we all know about General Patton, we all know about General Bradley and all. But a lot of us don't know about those soldiers. And as I said, in Vietnam, I saw it firsthand. And the bravery of some of these guys is just unbelievable. And they're the most humble. They don't consider themselves heroes. They just consider themselves doing their duty.
Well, he's been involved with Bataan veterans since he was very young in his military career. He's the one that helped instill in me personally this love for our Bataan veterans and to ensure that we honor them at every opportunity. The General Baca, he honored our Bataan veterans to this day. He still honors them. He has Jose Quintero's flag that was used to wave off U.S. bombers as they were approaching the concentration camp. He's just an incredible testament to what those men suffered. He was personal friends with many of them. There is not a person on this earth today that could tell you as many stories about Bataan veterans as General Baca. He was personal friends with many of them. He flew with them. He took them to various events all over the place. He was a personal friend. If you talked, you know, I had the opportunity over the last decade to get to know a few of these Bataan veterans, and they all speak very fondly of General Baca, their friendship with him. They knew that he was the one that helped them many of them get their medals and their awards that they were due. He was very instrumental in that. Like I said, there's not a person alive today that could tell you as much about these Bataan veterans as General Ed Baca.
Well, when I was a young second lieutenant, my cousin, again, my role model and cousin, Colonel Martinez, was kind of their guy. Even though he was not a Bataan veteran himself, he was a World War II veteran, they kind of adopted him as one of theirs. And so he gave a lot of speeches and all, and they loved him. One time he had to give a speech, and he was going out of town. So he called me in as a young second lieutenant, and he said, "You're going to go address the Bataan veterans at the Elks Club, excuse me." And so I said, fine. Who are the Bataan veterans? Well, no, I knew a little bit about them, but I didn't really know as much as I should have. So then I started doing research, and then the more research I did into the Bataan veterans, the more my respect for them went up 100%. So when I went to deliver the speech, there was it was a statewide convention, so there was over 100 Bataan veterans there. And I truly walked in there and I told them that I felt like a midget among giants. And they liked me, and so they invited me back, and then they invited me back, and before you knew it, I was part of them. And all the way up to the time I became the Adjutant General. So I got to hear their stories firsthand. I got to know them firsthand. I got to know their families. And it just enriched my life so much. And so when I talk about any success that I had, I did it standing on their shoulders too. When I was appointed chief, the history of the state, you understand, when I was appointed chief, I was the 27th chief of the National Guard Bureau. There's not very many states that have had the honor of having a chief of the Guard Bureau. And I attribute that a lot to the fact of how well the state had performed during the time I was the Adjutant General and the history of the state. Everybody knew about Baton, everybody knew about the history, and I think that all contributed to me getting appointed chief. I'm proud of what I've been able to share, the experiences that I've been able to share from that almost 42 years of military service. I've been telling enlisted people, and I taught a leadership seminar afterwards, and I tell them and paraphrase what Kelvin Coolidge said. It's not the most intelligent that succeeds. It's not the best educated person that succeeds. And it's not the most knowledgeable person that succeeds. It's the person with the most persistence. Persistence is everything. And that's what I tell them. You never give up. You just keep going at it and going at it. And there's obstacles that will always be in your way. You go around the obstacle, over the obstacle, or through the obstacle, whatever you do, and you'll succeed. My biggest hobby is my grandchildren and my children. I've got, as I mentioned before, 7 children, 21 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. And I enjoy being with them, and we have a lot of fun together. My wife was always there with me and always by my side. And she gave me a certain confidence that I probably lacked when I first joined. She believed I could do anything. So she expected that of me. And so I did. I went along. I can remember that we had a big family. We had 7 children. And it seemed like every time we had a new child, I got promoted. So it worked out really well. But she was there by my side. She, in my absence, she raised the finest 7 children in the world. And I was absent quite a bit, going to schools, being in Vietnam, all that. She was there to raise our children and supported me through my entire career. I tell the story that when we retired, we were living in an apartment while our home was being built by my son, by the way. One of my sons was a contractor. And they were having a retirement ceremony for me down in Roswell. Understand, I had just got back from the National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C. Well, I went downstairs on the apartment to the garage, and I got my uniform. They wanted everybody that was going to go, they invited all the veterans, were to wear the uniform of their era. So I went down to get my uniform, which I had packed away, thinking I probably would never use it again. So I come upstairs with my uniform hanging over my shoulder, and my wife started crying. And I looked at her and I said, what's the matter? What did I do wrong? And she laughed, and she's a little bit, and between the tears, and she said, it's the uniform. She said, you wore it every day for almost 42 years, and I miss it. I have absolutely no regrets. I think everything that I did worked out well because I did achieve the top. I don't think I would do anything much different.